Greetings, welcome to the Citizen Digital. You're with me, your host, Poppy Thompson. Another exciting episode today. We have the honor of talking to the Regional Director for the IFC for Eastern Africa, Jumoke. Jumoke, welcome to Tanzania. Welcome to the Citizen Digital.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so first and foremost, you have garnered quite vast experience within the financial, the corporate sector over the years. I want us to talk a bit about your experience working with the World Bank. I mean, you started your career in Nigeria, the banking sector, and then moved to the World Bank. And now you're heading the Eastern Africa region at the IFC. How has your experience shaped the type of leader, corporate leader that you are today? And how have you used that to enable, to empower other women at a personal level and also organizational level?
That's a tough one. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. So I'm a chemical engineer by training. A lot of people don't need that. And the knowledge of being a chemical engineer certainly prepared me for the financial sector. An experience when I was training was that there were very few women in the plant where I did my internship, and so that actually restricted my ability to actually continue working in that plant. And so when I moved into finance,
Yes.
while in Nigeria, and also when I joined the IFC, I actually was able to ensure that my team members and team members of other teams I worked with, when we had female members of the team, they were not just silent. I would call on them, make sure that they were part of the conversation. And when they had ideas, the ideas were listened to. One fun thing that's I began to do with another female colleague, and which other male colleagues also started doing. Sometimes when a female colleague says something, another male colleague later will think, and that is the one that will be acknowledged. And so what we started doing is, when a female colleague says something is not acknowledged, another female colleague will say, what she said. And then the male colleagues caught on to that and would say, and what she said was very interesting, don't you think? That way ensuring that the female colleagues also got their fair recognition. And our other male colleagues got to realize that it was not only their male colleagues that were making valuable contributions, but that everybody had something good to say. So that is something that we have certainly, and I've certainly continued doing, and would certainly help to bring in the young, with the much younger women in the space. In IFC running our Eastern Africa operations, I would say that trying to ensure that we have fair gender balance, both in terms of our colleagues and also in with our clients. Through our gender program, both at the corporate world and also in the SMEs and also in the supply chain.
Yeah.
One of the things we always say to companies is, if you look through your supply chain or your suppliers or your distributor, what percentage of women-owned businesses are in your supply chain? If you only add one more in each category,
Yes.
it will go a long way. If every institution or every company in the different areas in which you have suppliers, if it's supplier of pens, if you have to sue for your work, if it is supply of, say, a big construction company, supply of cement or sand or whatever, just add one. Every year, add one woman in the supply chain for one category. Before we know it, you will have a fair number. Because honestly, as countries and as institutions, we will not progress if we have half of our population, and that half of the population that is bringing up our boys and girls, if they are not fairly represented in the economy, the young boys that we're bringing up to will think that girls should not be part of the economy, and we will not grow at the pace we should.
Yes, indeed. So now the advantage of having women holding various positions in different companies is quite known. It's said that they contribute even more to the GDP. But yet again, we're seeing that many organizations still face that gender gap when it comes to appoint women in leadership positions. What seems to be the bit of a mismatch?
I think it's seen both ways. We like to say, and this now is a joke, but it's a part of the truth. If a guy can say bonjour, he will say speaks French. But if a woman cannot have a full conversation in French, she thinks that she has to be able to do it 110% before she applied. But a guy will say, 40-50% of this I can do so many for my application. So we also need to work on our women to be able to build their confidence, to understand that they also can do it. You don't need to be able to do it 110% before you apply, but you need to pull yourself up, look at what it is, know what you can do, identify the gap, and look at ways to get you above the gap, and then go for it.
Okay. So now, as you empower women in the labor force, we also understand that you also try to upskill every chance of their entrepreneurship capabilities. Now, how do you approach the tool? Because we know that there is a bit of a challenge whenever it comes to women getting positions within organizations. But then again, you're also trying to create this whole generation of entrepreneurs. Do you use the same tactics? Because the dichotomy is quite vast. You know, the challenges that women entrepreneurs are facing might not necessarily be the same as the challenges that those in the labor force face. So how does the IFC approach such job?
So we've had a number of programs. Some of which would say maybe finance to equal, energy to equal in some countries. Essentially, trying to demystify the knowledge and the thing that women need to do in order to get it. That's more of the corporate structured world. I would say in SME and in the rural marketplace, it's more a question of actually helping them to be able to access finance services. Access finance a lot of the time because they don't have collateral. And trying to enable them access finance in ways that are suitable to the structure of the economy that they're in. Thirdly, is also training both the banks in particular to understand how to lend to such categories of society. Because doing a corporate loan is very different from providing finance to an MSME. And the sorts of things you will look at are different. And in a combination of that training to the bank, training to the women themselves to understand how to package themselves better, goes a long way into bridging the gap in total. And sometimes it may be as simple as then explaining very easy things to them. I take them above the edge.
That's it. Now, as you help enable women gain access to finances through working with banks, in Tanzania you have a couple of programs that are ongoing, but we still see a challenge of still women being able to get startup capital to fund the businesses. What do you think is the solution to this, and how long might it take women now to be on an equal scale when it comes to accessing finances through the financial institutions that are in place?
I wish I had a crystal ball. I wish I had a crystal ball to say this is how long it will take. But I think that with the push that we are all that pretty much everyone else will want to, with the realization by a crowd of banks and development partners about the gaps of gender finance. I think we will get there sooner rather than later. But I also think that a lot of the training possibilities that are available will certainly help to get there.
Okay. So now, digital inclusion is can be tied in with financial inclusion. Now, we understand that the theme for this year's UN or Women's National Celebration has a digital element to it. How does the IFC ensure in Tanzania, in the African market, that as you push financial inclusion, the digital element, women's access to digital, online education, edtech, that is in line with these other efforts?
Yeah, the statistics are that 68% odd of men have access to cell phones. With women, is much less, is in the 50s. Men is in the high 60s. And of those women, very few of them actually do online colors or scrolling and going online. If we are able to, we know that there are a lot of small and medium-scale women enterprises. If we're able to provide training to them to help them to get online and enable them to participate in online commerce, the number of female entrepreneurs that are active in this space will go up. One. Two, by that, the percentage of women that are active online will also go up. So I think it's a combination of finance and training.
Okay. So now, with the online education set to double in the year 2026, what are the specific initiatives that are being undertaken by the IFC in partnership with different innovators, even in Tanzania, to ensure now we can scale that access to edtech?
So there are a number of technology hubs that are being looked at. Some, and there are in Kenya, there are in Tanzania, that we are looking to actually work with to make things happen. One. Two, there are, I would call them, we say BBS providers, business developers, services providers, who may not necessarily be the location the women are, but if the women are able to get online, we can actually get access to online training to help in bridging that gap. So I'd say that if we can, part of this also has to do with the infrastructure. If we're able to reduce the cost of women, the cost of online access anywhere globally in the country, that will increase the number of people who can go online, and that will increase the ability to reach the edtech services that we're talking about.
We get going. Now, let's look at the macroeconomics. There's a report that was done by the IFC which looked at how African countries can do reforms that will enable private partners to sort of invest in the infrastructure sector. Because, for example, in Tanzania right now, the national debt is a big debate. We have politicians, we have people in the economic space talking about how we're headed in the wrong direction, but majority of the money that's being attributed to the national debt is due to the mega projects that the government is undertaking. But then again, people say that if we get good policies that will ensure private partners enter into the infrastructure space, then the rates will go way down. So what are these reforms that you think will enable Tanzania be able to attract the private partners within the infrastructure space?
Interesting, we were just in the PPP breakout session in there. And the summary of that conversation was capacity on the part of government to design the solution, because projects are not just projects. Projects are solutions to a problem.
Yes, indeed.
And PPP is a way of using other people's money to develop today what government needs to be developed, and for government to then be paid the cost of that money today over a period of time. That's essentially what a PPP is. And a PPP, and in order to get other people to use their money to develop a project that government wants developed, you have to ensure that the policies and regulations and of government is, if I'll first of all say it's equitable, it's fair, it is sustainable over time, it is consistent. If you change the law today, change it again tomorrow, change it to 3 years' time, private sector and lenders as well say, well, we don't know what the conditions would be to finance it, and so we will wait until they don't change the laws again. And that country will result. Yes. So, the consistency of policies is one. PPPs is also a sharing of the risk. In order for a PPP to work, the risks have to be shared.
And there.
The risks that can be undertaken by the private sector will. If let me use the example of energy and let me use transmission for us. If a private sector is coming to put up transmission from, let me see, from Bagamoyo to Dar es Salaam, the part that the transmission line will take, the government is the only party that is able to ensure that the land through which that transmission will go, that the land is available, is clean, and can be handed over to the private sector to undertake putting up the transmission line. That is the risk that the government will have to take. So let me use energy distribution, saying providing power to all the different houses in Dar es Salaam. The responsibility for providing the power, billing the private sector or billing the individual households and collecting the money for the electricity that has been billed, 100% that of the utility, except for the responsibility to provide electricity to, say, the ministry. Because in some countries, it is not possible for the utility, a private utility, to disconnect ministry. In some countries, if the private sector distributor of electricity disconnects the ministry, proper. But in some other countries, the government has said the ministry have the budget to pay for electricity. If they don't pay for electricity, you private sector electricity distributor will connect them. In this last case, the responsibility for collection is private sector because government has given the guarantee to this. But in the other instance, government would have to take that risk of that collection of government bills. So it's a risk allocation. This risk that we see here, who can take it government? Who can take it private? And that's the way it works. So that it's like a marriage.
Yeah.
And if you're entertaining my days, in Swahili it's called mzinga, right? In my language it's something else. But let me use the mzinga thing. At least the mzinga needs to, let you guys know that this is that, and that is the way it will work. So that is the way PPPs can work successfully. But there is a lot of knowledge sharing, information that needs to, because not everybody understands what PPPs are.
Yeah.
And so there is a need to educate on the part of lawmakers. There is a need to to educate the population so that we understand what it is. That it's not a case of governments giving up its assets. That it's a case of governments using other people's money to build something today and then government paying them back over a period of time.
Yes, indeed. As we're still on that, on the regulatory environment, rule of law, control of corruption is also one of the challenges that Africa faces. Now, IFC as one of the development partners, how do you ensure that whenever you invest your money, let's say in Tanzania, that the rule of law, the corruption control and accountability are things that the government really monitors? So what's your approach on that?
So first of all, IFC finances private sector. In the case of PPP, IFC will finance the private sector party that is undertaking the project. And so we are financing private sector entity to undertake services that have been concessioned to them through a legal agreement. And so the financing is here to private sector for the services that they are undertaking, not to public employees. Now, one of the things we do when we are financing private sector for instance, in concessions like this, we want to investigate how did they win the concession. Was it through a fair, transparent bid? If so, how did the company itself, when it was being set up, how did the company come about? How did the company make its money? If it's not clear, we tend to not work with such companies.
Now, the Tanzanian government, the current regime, has undertaken massive reforms in the economy, in the business space, by where it's trying to attract more investors, foreign investors, but also encouraging local investors. How's the IFC's view on the regulatory changes within, the economy of Tanzania, and what are some of the areas? Because you're one of the investors in the private sector. What are some of the areas that you think still need to be looked at the government in order now to create that all conducive environment for all investors?
So we think that there's a lot of potential in Tanzania. One of the areas that we see lots of potential in is in the agribusiness space. And when I say agribusiness, I mean in the entire value chain of growing food crops, whether it is food crops or cash crops for export, or for food security locally, transforming it into, say, from cereals to whatever flour it is. Also, the processing part, if it's the processing beyond milling, and all that. So we see lots of value that can be in that space. If we talk about, say, oil seeds, for instance, you could say growing the oil seeds, transforming it to oil, but also transforming it to oil, also using the produce to then go into the feed mills and feeds for poultry or food sector, which that helps to create the improve the productivity in the of animal, which in the poultry space. So there are lots of things, different areas that we can see. I think the future is very bright in the agri space. But this morning, there was talk about land, ensuring that the provision of land capital cleanly, so that the investors do not have the constraints of being able to get the land that they need to work in and getting the land clean. Yeah. There is an logistics end of it. Both logistics, if it's there's logistics, it could be just logistics of road transport, it could be logistics of cold chain, depending on what it is. And there's also the question of, if I go back to growing, or the efficiency of production, improving production. I mean, if I use rice, for instance, I'm not sure exactly of what the productivity measure in Tanzania is. But if I use the example of another country and Vietnam, of where the other country was 2,000, 3,000 tons per hectare, Vietnam is 9,000 tons per hectare. So you can see where the disparity is 3 times as productive. So again, improving the productivity so that you're able to do more.
Noted, perfect. So I just want to get a sense of the IFC's critical focus areas for Tanzania. The agriculture sector is being massively impacted by climate change. In the morning, we were talking about some of the northern regions in Tanzania facing, drought due to, climate change. How has that sort of transformed some of the critical areas that you've invested in?
We would still go into agriculture and agribusiness. There's people that have got to eat. But we need to do it smartly.
Yeah.
Climate smart agriculture in ways that actually can make it a lot more productive than in the old way. No, this doing agriculture using irrigation. What? Smart irrigation, not flood irrigation. Doing it smartly so that you're using less water because there is water prices coming. And also making sure that you're able to keep most of the moisture in the soil. That way, over time, you're using less and less water all the time. So climate smart agriculture will always be there. Transforming products, as I was saying earlier, transforming products from raw material to intermediate product to finished products will also be key. And there are a lot of women in that value chain. There are lots of women in that value chain. So being able to help them to actually boost the opportunities and potential will be key.
Okay, so on that note, as we're wrapping up, I want you to send your own personal message to women out there as we're celebrating Women this month.
Okay, so as we're celebrating Women this month, women need to make sure that they are in part of the conversation, that we do not let others tell our stories, we tell our stories ourselves. And if there is a company, if you're a supplier, if there's a company you want to supply to, be bold and ask to do one trial, but make sure you deliver, because when you perform, they will come back. So be bold, go out there, be a part of the conversation, and the sky is bright. Thank you.
Perfect. Jumoke, it's been a pleasure.
Hey.
You were with me in Pocket Thompson for the Citizen Edition. Until next time, bye-bye.